All in the Family wasn't just groundbreaking television. It was a mirror held up to American society in the 1970s, showing us our prejudices, our conflicts, and our changing values through the Bunker household. While Archie, Edith, Gloria, and Mike became beloved fixtures in living rooms across America, not every character who walked through that door in Queens was welcomed by audiences. Some characters grated on viewers' nerves, others represented everything people were trying to escape from in real life, and a few were just plain annoying. Here are the 10 most hated All in the Family characters. Number 10. Irene Lorenzo.
No kidding. Who's the pigeon?
Minnesota Fats over there.
Irene Lorenzo, played by Betty Garrett, was Archie's neighbor and became a recurring character in the later seasons of the show. She was pushy, opinionated, and had a habit of inserting herself into the Bunker's business, whether they wanted her there or not. While the character was supposed to provide comic relief and serve as a foil to Archie, many viewers found her exhausting rather than entertaining. Irene's main problem was that she lacked the warmth that made other intrusive characters tolerable. When Edith inserted herself into situations, it came from genuine concern and kindness. When Irene did it, it often felt like nosiness disguised as neighborliness. She had strong opinions about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them, which would have been fine if those opinions had been interesting or funny, but they often just felt like another person yelling in an already loud household. The timing of Irene's introduction was particularly unfortunate. She appeared during a period when the show was struggling to maintain its early magic. The Bunker household had always been crowded with strong personalities, but there was a hierarchy. Archie and Edith at the center, with Mike and Gloria creating the generational conflict that drove the show. By the time Irene arrived, Mike and Gloria were preparing to leave, and the show needed new sources of conflict. But Irene felt imposed rather than organic. The character appeared more frequently after Jean Stapleton reduced her role in the later seasons, and some viewers felt like Irene was an attempt to fill the void Edith left. But Edith was irreplaceable, and comparisons weren't kind to Irene. Betty Garrett was a talented performer who'd had a successful career in Hollywood musicals, but even her skills couldn't make audiences warm to a character who felt like an inferior substitute for what they'd lost. Irene's relationship with Archie was supposed to be combative and funny, with her liberal views clashing against his conservative ones, but the chemistry never quite worked. The arguments felt forced rather than organic, and viewers could tell the writers were trying to recreate the Mike-Archie dynamic without understanding what made that relationship compelling. By the time Archie Bunker's Place premiered as the successor series, Irene was a regular, but she never stopped being divisive among fans. Number 9. Stretch Cunningham.
Steam down the loading platform. Stretch and arch. Put them together. You got starch!
Stretch Cunningham, played by James Cromwell, was one of Archie's co-workers at the loading dock and appeared in several episodes throughout the series' run. He was supposed to be the stereotypical dumb friend, tall, gangly, and not particularly bright. The problem was that the character's stupidity wasn't endearing or funny in the way that, say, Edith's naivete was. It just made him seem like dead weight in scenes that would have worked better without him. Stretch's main function seemed to be standing around while Archie complained about work, life, and politics. He rarely contributed anything meaningful to conversations, and mostly served as a sounding board for Archie's rants. When he did speak up, his observations were so obvious or so dumb that they stopped the momentum of scenes rather than adding to them. Viewers tuning in to watch family dynamics and social commentary didn't need a character whose sole purpose was to make Archie look smarter by comparison. The character highlighted one of All in the Family's occasional weaknesses. When it ventured outside the Bunker household, the writing wasn't always as sharp. The workplace scenes at the loading dock never achieved the same level of humor or insight as the scenes around the dinner table, and Stretch embodied that problem. He was a character created to fill space rather than serve the story, and audiences could tell. James Cromwell would go on to have a distinguished career with memorable roles in Babe, L.A., Confidential, and many other films and shows, but Stretch Cunningham remained a forgettable footnote in his filmography. Even Cromwell seemed aware that the character wasn't working, playing him with minimal energy as if he knew viewers weren't invested in Stretch's presence on screen. Number 8. Veronica Rooney.
Something on your mind, Archie?
On my mind, don't be silly.
Veronica Rooney, played by Ann Mira, was introduced in the later seasons as Archie's business partner at the bar he purchased. She was supposed to be a strong, independent woman who could stand up to Archie and give as good as she got. In theory, this should have worked. Ann Mira was a talented comedian with decades of experience in television and comedy clubs. In practice, the character felt like she'd wandered in from a different show. Veronica's energy didn't match the world of All in the Family. She was broad and loud in a series that had always found humor in more grounded, realistic character work. Her arguments with Archie lacked the underlying affection that made the Mike-Archie conflicts work. There was no sense that these two people actually cared about each other underneath the bickering. They were just two people who happened to own a bar together and couldn't stand each other. The character also represented the show's struggle to reinvent itself in its final seasons. With Mike and Gloria gone to California and Edith's role reduced, the writers tried to populate Archie's world with new characters who could generate similar dynamics. But Veronica felt like a pale imitation of what the show had once been. She wasn't a character with her own identity. She was a collection of traits designed to create conflict with Archie. Viewers who had invested years in the Bunker family didn't want to watch Archie argue with a business partner they barely knew. They wanted the family dynamics and social commentary that had made the show special, and Veronica represented the show's drift away from what had made it great. When All in the Family ended and Archie Bunker's Place began, Veronica continued as a regular, but she never won over the skeptical audience that had already decided she didn't belong. Number 7. Teresa Bettincourt. Teresa Bettincourt, played by Liz Torres, was introduced as Archie's Puerto Rican housekeeper after Edith's death in Archie Bunker's Place. The character faced an impossible task: filling the void left by Edith Bunker, one of the most beloved characters in television history. No one could have succeeded at that, but Teresa's character made things worse by being so obviously designed as not Edith that it highlighted what was missing. Teresa was young, attractive, and sharp-tongued, everything Edith wasn't. She didn't take Archie's nonsense and frequently called him out on his prejudices and stupidity. This made sense as a character choice. You couldn't replace Edith with another sweet, naive homemaker because the comparison would have been unbearable. But making Teresa the opposite of Edith meant losing the heart of what made the show work. Archie and Edith's relationship was based on deep love and mutual dependence despite their differences. Archie and Teresa's relationship was just a boss and employee who barely tolerated each other. The show tried to develop sympathy for Teresa by giving her storylines about her struggles as a Puerto Rican single mother, but these plots felt preachy rather than organic. All in the Family had always addressed social issues, but it did so through the lens of family relationships we cared about. With Teresa, the show was asking us to care about social issues affecting a character we'd barely gotten to know, and it didn't work. Liz Torres did what she could with the material, bringing warmth and humor to a character that was fundamentally misconceived. But viewers never connected with Teresa, and her presence was a constant reminder that Edith was gone and the show had lost its soul. When Gene Stapleton decided to leave the series, the producers probably should have ended it rather than trying to continue without her. Teresa became the symbol of that mistake. Number 6. Stephanie Mills.
Want me a manicure set? She cooks my favorite foods for me.
Stephanie Mills, played by Danielle Brisebois, was Edith's young niece who came to live with the Bunkers in the show's 9th season. The character was added to inject new life into the series by introducing a child to the household, but many longtime viewers resented her presence. She represented the show's desperation to find new storylines and dynamics as the original cast began to move on. Stephanie wasn't a badly written character, and Brisebois was a talented child actor who would go on to have a successful career. The problem was that Stephanie fundamentally changed what All in the Family was about. The show had always been about generational conflict between adults, Archie's old-fashioned views clashing with Mike and Gloria's modern perspectives. Adding a young child shifted the focus to child rearing and family dynamics in ways that felt more like a traditional sitcom than the groundbreaking social commentary the show had been known for. Many viewers felt that Stephanie was added for cheap sentimentality, giving Edith a child to care for in her later years when Gloria had moved away. The character's backstory involved her mother dying, which the show handled with appropriate seriousness, but it also felt manipulative. The show was asking viewers to accept this tragic newcomer into the Bunker household and care about her immediately, without earning that emotional investment. The addition of a child also meant the show had to watch its language and content in ways it never had before. All in the Family had always pushed boundaries with adult themes and frank discussions of controversial topics. With a 9-year-old in the house, those discussions either had to be toned down or happen around Stephanie, which limited the show's scope. Viewers who'd appreciated the show's willingness to tackle uncomfortable subjects felt like it was being defanged. Stephanie's character also represented a broader problem with television in the late 1970s, the tendency to add cute kids to aging shows in hopes of boosting ratings. From Cousin Oliver on The Brady Bunch to Seven on Married with Children, these additions rarely worked and usually signaled that a show was running out of ideas. Stephanie wasn't as egregious as some of these examples, but she still felt like a desperate attempt to recapture something that was slipping away. Stephanie continued into Archie Bunker's place, where she became Archie's ward after Edith's death. This gave the character more purpose. Archie having to raise a young Jewish girl forced him to confront his prejudices in new ways. But for viewers who had loved the original All in the Family, Stephanie remained a symbol of the show's decline from groundbreaking social satire to conventional family sitcom. Number 5. Frank Lorenzo.
I scream for you. Hello, everybody. Back in.
Frank Lorenzo, Irene's husband played by Vincent Gardenia, appeared in numerous episodes as Archie's neighbor and became a recurring presence in the show's later seasons. Frank was supposed to be Archie's working-class buddy, someone he could relate to more easily than his liberal son-in-law. But Frank lacked the dimension that made Archie himself compelling. He was just loud, opinionated, and not particularly funny about it. The character's main problem was redundancy. All in the Family already had Archie as the loud, opinionated, working-class man with outdated views. Adding Frank meant having two characters filling essentially the same role, and Frank suffered by comparison. When Archie spouted prejudiced nonsense, it was somehow forgivable, because we knew he loved Edith and his family despite his flaws. When Frank did it, there was no underlying warmth to make him sympathetic. Frank and Irene's marriage was portrayed as contentious and unhappy, which was supposed to contrast with Archie and Edith's ultimately loving relationship. But watching a miserable married couple bicker wasn't entertaining, it was just depressing. The show had always found humor in conflict, but Frank and Irene's conflicts lacked the wit and underlying affection that made other arguments work. Vincent Gardenia was a respected character actor who brought dignity to every role he played, but even he couldn't make Frank Lorenzo interesting. The character appeared more frequently in Archie Bunker's place, but viewers never warmed to him. He remained a supporting player in a show that was running out of compelling stories to tell, a reminder that not every character who entered the Bunker universe deserved to be there. Number 4. Barney Hefner.
To the greatest entertainer in the world, and to the man who gave me the opportunity of meeting him face.
Barney Hefner, played by Alan Melvin, was Archie's best friend and appeared regularly throughout the series' run. While Barney wasn't universally hated the way some characters were, a significant portion of viewers found him irritating and wondered why Archie would be friends with someone so obviously dim and useless. Barney was supposed to be the loyal buddy character, but he often came across as a hanger-on who brought nothing to the table. The character's main role was agreeing with whatever Archie said and laughing at his jokes. This made him feel less like a friend and more like a yes man, which didn't reflect well on Archie either. When the show wanted to demonstrate how wrong Archie's views were, they'd have intelligent characters like Mike challenge him. When they wanted to show how people enabled those views, they'd have Barney nod along. But this made Barney seem spineless rather than supportive. Barney's home life was portrayed as unhappy, with references to a nagging wife and a son who was a disappointment. This was supposed to make him sympathetic and explain why he spent so much time at Archie's house, but it just made him seem pathetic. Viewers didn't enjoy watching a middle-aged man use his friend's house to escape his own life. They wanted characters with agency and purpose, not sad sacks hiding from their problems. The few episodes that focused on Barney's personal life didn't improve his standing with viewers. His problems always seemed mundane compared to the serious issues the Bunker family dealt with, and his solutions to those problems rarely showed any growth or wisdom. He was a static character in a show built around character development and social progress, which made him feel like dead weight. Barney also represented a type of male friendship that was common in that era, but didn't translate well to television. Two guys sitting around, drinking beer, and complaining about their wives without actually saying anything meaningful to each other. This might have been realistic, but realism doesn't always make for compelling television. The show was at its best when characters challenged each other and forced growth, not when they enabled each other's worst instincts. Alan Melvin was a reliable character actor who appeared in countless sitcoms, but Barney Hefner wasn't his finest work. The character continued into Archie Bunker's place, where he became a regular at Archie's bar, but he never evolved beyond beyond being Archie's unfunny sidekick. In a show full of dynamic, complex characters, Barney stood out as the one who never grew or changed. Number 3. Maude Findlay.
Are you waiting for a special invitation? I said breakfast is on the table.
Maude Findlay, Edith's cousin played by B. Arthur, was so polarizing that she got her own spin-off series, Maude, which ran for 6 seasons. But before she became a breakout character, she was deeply divisive among All in the Family viewers. Maude was loud, opinionated, and aggressively liberal, designed to be Archie's opposite in every way. When she appeared on the show, she and Archie would spend entire episodes screaming at each other about politics and social issues. The problem with Maude was that she was just as obnoxious as Archie, just from the opposite side of the political spectrum. The show wanted viewers to see her as the voice of reason standing up to Archie's bigotry, but she was often so strident and self-righteous that she became unlikable. She talked down to people, assumed moral superiority, and seemed incapable of having a conversation that didn't turn into a lecture. Viewers who loved All in the Family appreciated how the show presented multiple perspectives and let audiences draw their own conclusions. Mike challenged Archie's views, but he did so as a family member who had a relationship with Archie beyond their political disagreements. Maude showed up specifically to argue with Archie, which made her presence feel like a plot device rather than a real person. She existed to create conflict, and that limited her appeal. Maude's physical presence added to the intimidation factor. B. Arthur was a tall woman with a commanding voice, and she used both to dominate scenes. When she and Archie faced off, it often felt less like a debate and more like two people trying to out-yell each other. The wit and cleverness that made the Mike-Archie arguments compelling was often absent from the Maude-Archie showdowns, replaced by volume and vitriol. The character also represented a specifically Northeastern, educated, upper-middle-class liberalism that didn't resonate with all viewers. Maude lived in Tuckahoe, a wealthy suburb, and her concerns often reflected that privilege. When she lectured Archie about social issues, viewers who shared Archie's working-class background sometimes felt she was being condescending about problems she'd never personally experienced. B. Arthur was a brilliant actress who brought intelligence and power to the role, and her performance is what made Maude successful enough to warrant a spin-off. But on All in the Family, before her character was softened and developed in her own series, Maude represented everything viewers found exhausting about political arguments. Someone so convinced of their own righteousness that they couldn't see their own flaws. Number 2. George Jefferson.
Looking for a job. They are last on the list.
No, they ain't. The Puerto Ricans are last.
George Jefferson, played by Sherman Hemsley, became one of television's most iconic characters when the Jeffersons launched and ran for 11 seasons. But during his appearances on All in the Family, many viewers found him insufferable. George was Archie's black neighbor who had worked hard to build a successful dry cleaning business, and he was just as bigoted and loudmouthed as Archie, except his prejudice was directed at white people. The character was deliberately designed to show that prejudice existed on both sides of the racial divide, and that prosperity didn't automatically make someone enlightened or kind. This was important social commentary, and George's success story represented real progress in American society. But George's constant insulting of white people, his arrogance about his wealth, and his general nastiness made him hard to like. When Archie spouted his ignorant views, we at least had Edith's love for him to remind us he was redeemable. George had no such counterbalance in his early appearances. The episodes featuring George and Louise Jefferson often felt more like lecturing than entertainment. The show was making a point about how bigotry was learned behavior that could affect anyone regardless of race. But George's character made that point by being as unpleasant as possible. Viewers understood the message but didn't enjoy watching him deliver it. George's treatment of his wife Louise was also off-putting to many viewers. He frequently dismissed her opinions, made decisions without consulting her, and talked about his success as if he'd achieved it entirely on his own without acknowledging her contributions. Louise was patient and loving, despite George's difficult personality, but watching her endure his behavior was more frustrating than funny in those early appearances. The timing of George's introduction was also significant. He appeared during the height of the civil rights movement and represented both the possibilities and the problems of black economic advancement. Some black viewers appreciated seeing a successful black businessman on television, while others felt George's character reinforced negative stereotypes about nouveau riche behavior. White viewers were split between those who appreciated the show's willingness to show that prejudice wasn't limited to one race, and those who felt attacked by George's constant hostility. Once the Jeffersons launched and George's character was developed beyond being Archie's mirror image, he became more nuanced and lovable. His relationship with Louise showed his softer side, and his interactions with their son Lionel revealed his vulnerability. But on All in the Family, George was mostly just another angry man yelling, and audiences had enough of that with Archie. Number 1. Michael Meathead Stivic.
Do you love me?
Oh, Gloria, don't start this.
Do you love me?
Yes, I love you. I love you.
This might be the most controversial choice on this list, but Mike Stivic, played by Rob Reiner, was genuinely hated by a significant portion of All in the Family's audience. While younger, more liberal viewers identified with Mike and appreciated how he stood up to Archie's bigotry, many older and more conservative viewers found him insufferable, preachy, and disrespectful to his elders. The nickname Meathead that Archie gave him resonated with these viewers, because that's exactly what they thought of him. Mike was a graduate student in sociology who lived rent-free in Archie's house while going to school and pontificating about social issues. To viewers who worked hard for everything they had, Mike represented the entitled younger generation who criticized their elders while benefiting from their generosity. His speeches about social justice and political correctness felt condescending to viewers who saw him as a kid with no real-world experience telling people who'd worked their whole lives that they were wrong about everything. The character's relationship with Gloria complicated things further. Mike often seemed to care more about being right in arguments with Archie than about his wife's feelings or his responsibilities as a husband. He was frequently unemployed or underemployed while pursuing his education, which meant Gloria had to work to support them both. This didn't sit well with viewers who valued traditional gender roles, but it also bothered viewers who simply thought Mike was taking advantage of the situation. Rob Reiner played Mike with conviction and intelligence, making him a worthy opponent for Archie in their debates, but that intelligence sometimes came across as smugness, and Mike's certainty that he was right about everything alienated viewers who might have agreed with his politics, but found his delivery off-putting. He represented everything that critics of liberal politics found annoying: the assumption of moral superiority, the condescension toward working-class people, and the tendency to lecture rather than listen. The debates between Mike and Archie were the heart of All in the Family, showcasing generational and ideological conflict in American families. But while these arguments were compelling television, they also meant that viewers had to spend a lot of time listening to whichever character they disagreed with. For conservative viewers, that meant enduring Mike's speeches. For them, Meathead wasn't just Archie's insult, it was an accurate description of a character they genuinely couldn't stand. When Mike and Gloria moved to California and left the series, many viewers were relieved rather than sad. The show had always been about Archie's character and his evolution, and Mike's absence allowed that evolution to happen in new ways. Rob Reiner left to pursue his legendary directing career, but for a significant portion of All in the Family's audience, his departure from the show was a welcome development rather than a loss. All in the Family succeeded because it was willing to make audiences uncomfortable, to present characters and viewpoints that challenged viewers and forced them to examine their own beliefs. The characters on this list, whether they were intended as supporting players, comic relief, or legitimate ideological opponents, all served purposes in the show's ambitious goal of using comedy to address serious social issues. That these characters were hated doesn't necessarily mean they were badly written or poorly acted. In many cases, they were supposed to be irritating or challenging. The show wanted viewers to argue about these characters and what they represented, just as real families argued about politics and social change around their own dinner tables. The fact that people had strong negative reactions to these characters proved the show was hitting its mark. Some characters on this list, like George Jefferson and Maude Findlay, went on to lead successful spin-offs where they were developed beyond their roles as Archie's foils. Others, like Mike Stivic, remained divisive throughout the show's run, but were essential to its success, and some, like the various neighbors and co-workers, simply represented the show's later struggles to recapture the magic of its early seasons. The hatred these characters inspired speaks to how deeply invested viewers were in the Bunker family and the world they inhabited. People didn't just watch All in the Family, they lived with it, argued about it, and saw their own families reflected in it. When a new character appeared who didn't fit that world or threatened to disrupt the dynamics viewers loved, the rejection was personal and immediate. Television in the 1970s created appointment viewing in ways that modern streaming can't replicate. Families gathered around the television every week to watch All in the Family together, and they discussed what they'd seen. The characters who appeared in that sacred space became part of the family conversation, for better or worse. The characters on this list earned their hatred by failing to meet the standards the show had set for itself. Looking back, All in the Family's willingness to present unlikable characters and uncomfortable situations was part of what made it revolutionary television. Not every character had to be lovable, and not every episode had to end with reconciliation and hugs. The show trusted audiences to be intelligent enough to handle complexity and disagreement, which is why it remains relevant and powerful decades after it ended. If this trip through All in the Family's most hated characters brought back memories of watching the show and arguing about these people with your own family, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment and tell us which character you found most annoying, or defend someone from this list if you were one of the viewers who actually liked them. Thanks for watching, and remember, those were the days.